access to a cloud. Oh, no, I take that back, I do. So it's 9:20 my time now. I have 4.5 pages of outlined notes. I think I can get it done in the next 3 hours, so please bear with me. So thank you again, Dr. Maya. A couple of weeks ago, Dr. Maya extended to each of us an opportunity to consider how we might step forward and volunteer our gifts, our talents, our interests. And so I quickly responded to her and said that I'd like the opportunity to deliver a Sunday message. And although I am a founder of a virtual ministry, it is in its very early stages, and I haven't taken this opportunity before. So although I have public speaking experience, it's something very different, I think, to be more vulnerable and sharing my own journey, especially over the last 3 years, what brought me here. And yeah, so we'll just start off with that. So I think or Reverend James Gaither last week, wow, that was not planned, and yet it was not planned for me, and it was a perfect setup for this week. He walked through some of the mystical branches of Christianity, but more focused on Hinduism and the 4 yogi paths. And it really spoke to me, and it spoke to what I've been about, what the Living School for Action and Contemplation has been about as well. And so thank you. So Dr. Maya mentions Christian mysticism every week, and Richard Rohr and the Living School and the Center for Action and Contemplation, they are rooted in the Christian contemplative tradition, the perennial tradition, which is just code words for mysticism, Christian mysticism. And I pray that this will be just kind of a quick review of what what Reverend James said to us last week. And then maybe hopefully I can fold this into what I'd like to talk about. Mysticism, experience conscious union with God. God divine pervades all things, expansive and inclusive worldview. Despite differences in terminology, there are commonalities in all of the mystical branches of the world religions. Mystics recognize a higher dimension of being. They already believe they are already one with God, experienced, however briefly, this unitive consciousness or Christ consciousness. Inner assurance of immortality, not just a hope or a belief. And in Unity, he described the path of mysticism through study, teachings, prayer, and meditation, receiving God, and that's how I describe God, as good, orderly direction, God experiences of miraculous occurrences, at least to the person receiving them, and experiences of effortless flow, of assurances and increased ease, and vocations, feeling led to vocations of servant leadership. All of these characteristics, as I said, are shared with what I've been learning over the last several years, and indeed really inform and help me in what I'm doing right now for the center, aside from the ministry that I founded, and that is I'm a contractor with the center, have been for 5.5 years, and I facilitate their online education courses. So for instance, I'm facilitating a course called Breathing Underwater, which is based on Richard Rohr's book that explores the synchronicity between the Gospels, or correlations between the Gospels and the 12 steps. Fascinating work. He also has a class called The Franciscan Way. And there's a class on Mary Magdalene that features writings by Reverend Dr. Cynthia Bourgeot, if any of you know her. And let's see, The Interior Castle, which features Jim Finley, and also obviously the teachings of St. Teresa of Avila. So I do a lot of that work. And in addition, I'm a transcriptionist. And so I have the great good pleasure of having virtually Richard Rohr and Jim Finley and Cynthia Bourgeot and Brian McLaren and Barbara Holmes piped into my head virtually every day of the week, and I spend time transcribing their conferences and their podcasts that are available free of charge on their website. And I see that my good friend and partner, Kat McKelvey, is online with us today, and she assists me in that work as well. So I literally get paid to listen to Richard Rohr and the other core faculty members of the Living School. And this has really helped me for my foundation, for my own personal spiritual development, and also the Fulcrum 8 ministry. Fulcrum 8 is the name of the virtual ministry that I'm working with. And Mary Helen Leal is here with us this morning, and Brian McKelvey too, and they're my partners in the development of Fulcrum 8. So welcome to you all. Let's see. I really liked what Reverend James said last week, and that the invitation for us to imagine a world of mystics as being heaven on earth. Wow, just imagine that. And I think that because we're all drawn and led here to be here in this community right here and right now, that each of us is a mystic in our own way. I know that one of Richard Rohr's favorite quotes is by Paula Darcy. And that quote is, "God comes to us disguised as our life." So every day and every moment, we have an opportunity to live the mystical path and be called and respond to that unitive consciousness, not only in how we experience the divine, but also how we can share that experience with everyone and everything that we meet. And that's what I believe that I've been called to do. Now, what I've heard from Jim Finley, and I think even Reverend James said this last week, we can't make these experiences happen. We can't. They are gifts to us. What we can do is we can take a stance of least resistance for these experiences to happen to us. And how do we do that? Unity, like I was saying, that Reverend James talked about, we study, we pray, we meditate, we give service, and then as a result, we get out of our own way. We stop and disconnect and disengage from this constant, repetitive, stinking thinking that at least I experience far more than I like to admit, especially to a group of spiritual seekers, but it's true. And I think that, setting that aside in these different ways, practices, contemplative practices, helps us take a stance of least resistance for these things happening to us. So I think that last week when Reverend James was talking about the different paths of Hinduism, the one that he mentioned was the Bhakti. The first one he mentioned was Bhakti, the Bhakti path, which is the devotional path. It's the personal and experiential relationship with God. For us Christians, we often think of that relationship with Jesus. For Hindus, it might be Krishna. But he said that this is the most common path in the mystical traditions of Buddhism and Hinduism and Christianity. And it can emphasize movement and dance. And he named an example that really spoke to me of how this is manifested in our lives. And that is the example of Saint Francis of Assisi. Now you've heard Dr. Maya mentioned Richard Rohr. I keep talking about him. Well, why is Franciscanism important? Because he's a Franciscan priest. And he is grounded in this perennial tradition and the Franciscan alternative orthodoxy. Now, I was raised as a Roman Catholic. I went to Roman Catholic school. I had never heard of this alternative orthodoxy. And it's really very different. It's an adjunct orthodoxy to the traditional Roman Catholic tradition. And maybe I'll save that for next month if I'm invited back to speak and outline what that alternative orthodoxy looks like. But I will say it's a far more expansive worldview. It's inclusive. And, You know, we believe that there are truths that if something is true, if it's really, really true, it's true for everyone, everywhere, all the time, in every religion or no religion. And that's the place that I'm coming from and how I've been taught, especially through the Living School and in the courses that I facilitate. I don't know, I haven't verified this, but I trust it because Richard Rohr told me so, is that at least in the United States, many of you may have heard of the Library of Congress. And virtually everything that's ever published, there's some kind of reference to it in the Library of Congress. And he says that the longest bibliography, the most entries of works are on St. Francis of Assisi. So I just find that as an interesting little sidelight. Now, landscape architecture. I promised you something about landscape architecture in the introduction. So I'll just read this quick little abstract. Maybe you've had a chance to read it, maybe you didn't. The places we pass through, travel to, and settle down in deeply affect our inner landscapes. For the spiritual seeker attuned to the energy of place, there are many important internal and external boundaries, borders, and breakdowns from which to break free. In this talk, I will explore with you the new landscape architecture of psyche, soul, and physiology, and share with you my own transformative journey during the past 3 years as I traveled from breakdown to breakthrough. 3 years ago, I began my full 2-year journey with the Living School. I went to my first symposium after applying and was accepted. And this was at the beginning of August. A couple of weeks after the symposium was my birthday, August 21st. And on that day, we had a total eclipse of the sun. I should have known right then and there, I was in for some really big changes. A month or so before my birthday, I decided very last minute that I wanted to get myself to the path of totality on my birthday, meaning I would experience, wherever this was, I was going to experience this full eclipse. And I didn't know where to choose. Like, where should I go for this? And so I remembered something, and that is Astro Cartography. Let me read you just a quick little blurb about astrocartography. Maybe not. Basically, astrocartography is a form of locational astrology based on your natal chart. And it can show you both harmonious aspects and non-harmonious aspects of different places around the globe that match with you. So I was looking on this to see, well, where might the congruence be between my natal path, my astrocartography aspects, and where this path of totality was going to be. Well, as it turned out, I didn't go to those places, but I found out something that was even more important to me. Why was I still in Albuquerque? After 26 years, why was I still there, 25? I mean, yes, I love the sunshine and I love the green chili and I love the cultural diversity, but I'd been experiencing some, quite a bit, like some angst and discontent and dissatisfaction. I looked at that cartography map and wouldn't you know, there was a harmonious aspect that went straight through Albuquerque, New Mexico, and it was my people line. That's why I had been in Albuquerque, why I'd stayed in Albuquerque. It was the people that drew me here and kept me here. So instead of going anywhere that day on the total eclipse of the sun, I went to one of my favorite locations, and it's just west of town here in Albuquerque, called Rinconada Canyon. And Rinconada Canyon is part of a very long basalt rock formation. It's also very strong in native heritage. There are petroglyphs everywhere. And it's part of a national park or national monument, actually, in the United States. The first time I'd gone there was with my friend Mick, and he was to perform a past life regression with me. And he told me maybe what to expect. And I didn't experience any of what he told me I should expect to. What I experienced was just total blackness. I closed my eyes, he guided me through this regression, and all I saw was black. That's all I saw. But out of nowhere, something happened, something I had not heard of. He didn't tell me to expect it. I'd never heard of it before. And what happened was I became a human dowser of energy. And I started rocking back and forth for several minutes. And this was not me. I did not initiate this. I did not control it. I just was part of the energetic field. And as it turns out, this basalt formation is what they call a ley line. And a ley line is one of, probably thousands of lines across the globe that has a strong energetic feel to it, a presence that many of us can experience. Apparently I did. And for those of us in the United States, I've read since that one of the best places to go to experience these are Native American lands. And sure enough, that's where I was, and that's what I experienced. So I started the living school. I had my birthday. I had a total eclipse of the sun. I'd had this magical energetic experience out at Rinconada Canyon, and 6 months later, I had a breakdown. I'd left my job on medical leave. I had experience of deep and profound depression and anxiety, and I didn't know where my life was headed. I didn't know where I was going. I had just given myself over to this mystery. Long story short, let me see, time. Yep, better make it quicker. I ended up in Florida. 6 months later, I accepted a job proposal and I went to Florida. Florida is one of 2 states I swore I would never live in. And wouldn't you know, I went to Florida. So after 6 months of debating, should I, shouldn't I, shouldn't I sold everything I owned. I packed up what I didn't sell in my hatchback, my Honda Fit hatchback, packed up the 2 dogs, and I headed east and south. And I lived in Florida. Shortly after I arrived there, I knew I had a deep sense I had made a mistake. Things were not as they seemed. And I told it to friends, I want to come home, I made a mistake, and I was encouraged to stay. Just stay there, Lisa, it's too soon. But I can get my townhouse back, and I can actually get my government job back, but I stayed. And how I dealt with it, what helped me stay was I lived 2 blocks from the Atlantic Ocean. I started going down every morning early and meditating right next to the ocean. And it was a very healing place for me. There's a transfer of negative and positive ions in salt water that happens. And although I was told 27 years ago when I left Michigan, I'd be back in here because I'd missed the water. I never missed the water when I lived in the desert. Never, just didn't. But there was something about being 2 blocks from Atlantic Ocean and having that meditation time and witnessing that sunrise that kept me there, at least for the 7 months. I had one of my life's biggest question answered while I was there. When I applied for the living school, I had to answer several questions, and the one I remember was, where do you hope to be? What do you hope to get after 2-year experience in the living school? And my answer to that question was, I want to see me as God sees me. So while I was there, a couple months into it, I was talking to my spiritual director, and she asked me, so how are you experiencing this? How are you seeing? And I said, I'm starting to see myself on that beach. I'm starting to see God see me on that beach, meditating and having a devotional experience and committing to a contemplative practice on a daily basis. And I can see God seeing me that. And that was like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. You know, he was seeing me. He wasn't just seeing one drop of water in the ocean. He wasn't just seeing one grain of sand. He was seeing all of me, his creation. Well, a month or two later, the next time I talked to my spiritual director, I got an even bigger picture of how God sees me. And after, you know, months of witnessing these drop dead gorgeous sunrises, one after another, just amazing. I heard the small, still voice say to me, when I was looking at a sunrise, you know, thinking that's God, like God is that beauty, God is that grandeur. And the small, still voice said, no, Lisa, that's not how you should see me. That's how I see you. So very emotional experience, very deep and profound. 7 months into my stay in Florida, things fell apart. And in a matter of 5 hours, one Sunday afternoon, I packed my car. I loaded up my dogs and I headed north. And I was headed north to my family home in West Michigan. After 26, 27 years of being away, I went to live with my sister. And I had these romantic and sentimental dreams that I was now homeward bound and I was ready to go home again. And yeah, that didn't work out so much either. And after 5 months of being in West Michigan, I had to leave. And my sister convinced me I needed to come back to Albuquerque, and I didn't want to. I did not want to come back to Albuquerque, but I did because I didn't have anywhere else to go. I didn't have a clear path. And I was literally, I packed up my car once again, the hatchback with the loaded up the dogs, and I was headed south, and I had one stop to make, and that was to a Unity minister. I had to drop something off to her, and I said, I'm going to Albuquerque, but I don't know why. And I don't think I want to. And we had a quick discussion and I headed out and I headed south. And within 5 minutes, I experienced a complete relief, clarity, and understanding. Yes, you're to go to Albuquerque and there's a reason. And so from there on out, I was completely at ease during the next 2 days as I was driving home again. It sounds like a romantic journey, a heroine's journey, something Joseph Campbell has written about. I will be honest with you, it did not feel like that most of the time. I experienced this, what in the alternative orthodoxy or Franciscanism, this path of descent. And the path of descent is what I would call the stripping away, the getting down to bare essentials, the raw experience, the suffering that many of us, most of us actually have to experience in order to completely turn our lives and our will over to the care and power of God as we understand God. Because I'm not going to do it on my own. There are 2 ways that Father Richard says that this can happen: great love or great suffering. And I will be honest, I have, other than my 2 dogs, I cannot claim that I've experienced great love in this world. And I can't even say I've experienced great suffering compared to what so many people go through. But I put myself through this. I think when I left Albuquerque that first time and headed east, I went through to Harris Canyon, which was really like a birth canal. And I made that full year circuit and I drove back to Albuquerque and I had to come back through that birth canal and landed back home. I came back a year ago, August. I was just getting, kind of my bearings back and my feet on the ground, and I was doing work for the CAC, and then the pandemic hit. So that people line, that people connection has been missing. It hasn't been as strong as it once was. So I had to find ways to reach out. And that's why I'm here. You were literally put in the middle of my path. Unity Ministries sends out every 2 weeks a newsletter called The Path. And I was reading through The Path one day, and I see that Unity Center of Montreal is looking for a minister. And so I just looked, and what's Unity Center of Montreal about? Well, I see it's a small congregation, which is what I wanted, to be a part of. And I wondered, oh, I wonder if they only speak French. So I went online and saw that your website was in English. Anyway, next thing happened. I started showing up. Did you wonder, like, what is this woman from Albuquerque doing here? Well, that's what I thought brought me to you. Let me add a little extra to that story. I was telling Dr. Maya, I know I have French Canadian ancestry. I was told that, but I never knew anything about it. It was that branch of my heritage that I knew the least about. And my father's mother is French Canadian. So I haven't even shared this with Dr. Maya, but since I've been coming here to you, I've found out more about my heritage. My grandmother's maiden name is Lessard. I think that's how you pronounce it. And my people, although they settled in, West Michigan in the mid 1800s, they've been in French Canada for hundreds of years, as best as I can tell. And my people come from Montreal and Quebec.
Ah, really?
Really. And it gives me chills. It gives me chills to talk about it. My aunt, she's a genealogist, a bit amateur, and she found this information. And it's just, well, not only is it in my family ancestry, but wouldn't you know, I did another Astro Cartography map. And Montreal is smack dab in two of my most harmonious aspect lines, one of which is the Jupiter line, which says there's hardly a better place than the Jupiter DS line for dealing with all people. Tolerance, generosity, and freedom are the hallmarks for all private and business transactions. You will meet cultivated and intelligent people with a sense of humor whose broad-minded and liberal views deeply influence yours. That's one line. The other line is the midheaven line, which corresponds to that point where the sun is culminating. It exerts its strongest influence and throws the smallest shadow. According to this important point, deals with issues such as consciousness, power, and reputation. Planets along the midheaven or an aspect to it exert an influence on those areas of life. So that's why I'm here. And I keep coming back because I keep hearing messages that resonate with me. We're spread out. Dr. Maya's in California. I'm in Albuquerque. There's others from Albuquerque. Most, I think, of you are in Montreal, but here we all, the energy has brought us together. And I am so, so very grateful for that opportunity to join you. And now I think we better move into the meditation.
Right.
So I'd like to read just a very quick poem by Hafiz, who is the Sufi poet, and Sufism is the mystical branch of Islam. And as we head into the meditation, I'd like, if you would, to consider a word or a phrase or a body sensation that you can take from this poem and take it with you into this time of silent meditation. You'll hear a bell, you'll hear some background music. It's just a short 2-minute meditation, but I'd like to invite you to consider how this might resonate with you. And the Chihuahuas will be joining us downstairs. Deep breath in. Release. Center ourselves here and now in the presence of each other across North America and beyond. I am a hole in a flute. that the Christ's breath moves through. Listen to this music. Thank you. Before we move on, I have one more poem I'd like to share with you, and I'd like to send a shout out. Two of my Living School Circle Group members joined us today. Shannon from Dallas, Texas, and Anne, otherwise known as Emma Knightley, has joined us from Colorado. So,
thank you. Welcome. Welcome.
One more poem from Hafiz. Just coincidentally is dated for tomorrow. This place where you are right now, this place where you are right now, God circled on a map for you. Wherever your eyes and arms and heart can move against the earth and sky, the beloved has bowed there. The beloved has bowed there, knowing you are coming. I could tell you a priceless secret about your real worth, dear pilgrim. But any unkindness to yourself, any confusion about others will keep one from accepting the grace, the love, the sublime freedom divine knowledge always offers to you. Never mind, Hafiz, about the great requirements this path demands of the wayfarers. For your soul is too full of wine tonight to withhold the wondrous truth from this world. But because I am so clever and generous, I have already clearly woven a resplendent lock of his tresses as a remarkable gift in this verse for you. This place where you are right now, God circled on a map. And wherever, dear, you can move against this earth and sky, the beloved has bowed there, knowing you were coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, thank you. We're all applauding you. You can all unmute yourself, dear ones.